big audience, but quite a young audience. So just a quick question. Whose parents or grandparents were born in this country and came over to settle? Right, well, as I've got time, I had a shorter speech, but I'll probably give a longer speech because I think it's good to try and set some context to looking at the questions you've got there. I may dispel some myths you've heard, but hopefully I'll give you sort of what my view is. So, going back, obviously there has been a black presence in this country on and off for quite some time, probably more towards the latter couple of centuries, but things to remember is the importance of black people have made to this country, indirectly or directly. Via slavery, the money earned through the slaves helped found the Industrial Revolution, which you can see around you in Derby with its factories like this one on the Silk Mill. So it's something to importantly bear in mind. And also the contribution in fighting for this country, not only Indian troops, but also in the First World War, the Black West Indian Regiment. And moving on to the Second World War, again, there was a lot of black people, black men from the Caribbean who came over, mostly doing labouring work. Now, lots of them did return back to the Caribbean after the war, but especially Jamaica had suffered from a devastating hurricane in 1944. So for a lot of them, the country was still recovering. It was a colonial country. It was then faded from sort of people's memory because from being one of the richest islands in the world due to slavery, it was sort of very poor. In that atmosphere, my father, Tom, over there, was born in 1926, and by his teens, opportunities were few and far between, and a lot of also servicemen who'd come over had seen very few opportunities. So the Windrush itself, he saw an advert offering passage to England. Now, one thing that a lot of people say, and in the case of Windrush it's not the truth, they weren't invited over, but they weren't migrants, they were settlers. They were British citizens who had the right to come over here, which was a controversy in itself. If you look at some of the newspapers, like those articles there was quite a serious debate when this boat was coming with what they said was 500 Jamaicans. A lot were from other parts of the Caribbean as well, but predominantly Jamaican. My father being one of them, as you can see from his landing card. So they did arrive eventually in June 1948 at Tilbury. Now, a lot of them did have places to stay, but my father was one of those who didn't. So he stayed in Clapham South Deep Shelter for a while, but he got a job offer to come to Derbyshire, in fact, Ilkeston, which was then a big steel town. And he stayed, and obviously had his issues, and moved to Derby, and managed in the days when there were issues about no Irish, no dogs, no blacks on boarding houses and lodging halls. He bought a house on Reeves Road, not far from here, near the old baseball ground. And he apparently walked down the entry and saw literally the oldest daughter of the couple next door, a white woman, my mother Iris. She apparently took one look at him and ran away. She now jokes she should have kept on running. He did ask her out, and they started courting, as it was called in those days. And eventually they did marry, and we are quite fortunate. There are lots of sad tales of the parents of usually the English woman disowning the couple at all, but we've been quite lucky that our grandparents for that time were accepted. Although I think when my aunt took an interest in a certain Jamaican, they decided one Jamaican in the family was enough. But I'll come to that a bit later. So my parents had a home of their own, but what that meant was, again, a lot of Jamaicans came over and stayed with my parents. One of them being George Grignon's dad, who was told when he arrived in the country, if he wanted to work at the railway, go to Derby, and find Tommy Douce, and he stayed. And that's where I think my aunt took a shine to George's dad. But so he could have been a relative, as my mum keeps on joking with him. However, so those were quite hard times. So my dad was working in the factory as well. He was getting, because he was doing piecework, he was working too hard for some of the white co-workers. A few of them still remember him, apparently, I've read. But they started building up businesses, and you can see from some of the pictures there, obviously, we started to own shops. Ironically, we weren't allowed to sell white rum. We didn't get the license for quite some time. But the key why I would say my parents, Tom and I, so I remember the most, is during the 70s they bought a building and converted it into a nightclub that I would say you're probably more your grandparents, if they're in Derby, may have gone to, the Carrot, but it was controversial in its time. If you look in the middle board, the local newspaper implied that it would be a black-only nightclub for West Indians, and my father pointedly contacted the Telegraph and they published a retraction because everybody was welcome. Now, although it was a business, I think what my parents certainly didn't expect was how much it did to help foster good community relations. And talking to white people, Asians, as well as most of the Jamaican black community, how many people went there, including, I would say, famous people of the day were more cricketers, politicians, Derby County footballers. So they did, by chance, a lot of good. I would say my mother was more into reggae music, as of my recollection now shows. But it was a business to start with. But also myself, my brother Tom, brother Donald, Tom, Jeff, David, Ken, were all involved in our businesses over the years, plus members of the wider family as well. So it's been interesting because for years it used to be a long-running joke in our family, our father saying, I've been in this country so many years, but when the Windrush 50th anniversary began, we were contacted by the Windrush Foundation in London, and so there were a number of events for the 50th, including meeting the now King at a reception. And my father's ever charmed everybody with his favourite stories about himself, money, and the old days. But unfortunately, he was too ill for the 60th anniversary and died just before it. And the 75th last year, courtesy of George, up here has been phenomenal, actually. I would, like to again thank George, because I'll be honest, I was a bit sceptical when he contacted us a couple of years ago, but courtesy of Chatsworth as well, and now this permanent exhibition, I think this is not only my family's legacy, but also all the other people who came over. My father definitely was a pioneer, and he was one of those who almost started things, but you can see there's others here whose stories are fascinating. I mean, one I'd point out is Nadia O'Connor, who's a relation of ours. It's astonishing what she's gone through. Teresa as well was a lodger in one of my parents' bedsits 40 odd years ago, and look where she is now. So we've all helped each other over the years, and I think something to be aware of is, as George is saying, is Derby's wider history and the influence of not only my father but other people and what they had to go through to establish. Don't be casual about this. This is important, and this is why a lot of you are here. So you should bear that in mind. And also, we are settlers, we're not migrants. We're here to stay. Thanks.